You're listening to the 40 Thrive Podcast, the show created for women 40 and beyond, ready to shake things up. And now, your host, Jackie McDougall.
Hey you, welcome back to the 40 Thrive Podcast. We are breaking some new ground today, let me tell you. But before I get into that, I want to invite you to contribute to an upcoming episode. In just 8 weeks, we'll be celebrating episode 40 of the 40 Thrive Podcast. To do that, I've invited 40 Thrive listeners in our private Facebook group to share their thoughts on one of the first 40 episodes and how it maybe helped them or taught them, or they just felt connected to it. On this upcoming 40th episode, I'll be featuring 10 listeners sharing their feedback on the particular episodes, and I have a few spots left. So if you've benefited from the 40 Thrive Podcast in some way, shape, or form and would like to be featured, join the 40 Thrive Facebook group or just email me at hello@40thrive and I'll give you more information. Okay, speaking of feedback, I read this comment yesterday on our last episode with Elsie Escobar that really touched me. It's from a 34-year-old woman who wrote, "I'm 34 and I really need role models who are 40 plus and okay with it." She says it's not common where she lives, sadly. Everyone wants to be young always, or at least seem young. I don't, but I want to learn from others who mature and age gracefully. Okay, that really touched me because I know that people, mostly women of all ages, listen to this podcast. But if we can give a little bit of encouragement to those ladies who will someday soon be over 40, I think we're doing our job. This podcast isn't meant to sugarcoat all things over 40 or serve as a place to just complain. We're all in this together. This is a time to be honest, to support each other, and to find ways to thrive like never before. And I think it's really important to own this age and stage we're in, not only to empower ourselves and each other, but to show the next generation that there's a whole lot of great stuff to come. I can't say enough how honored I am that you, yes, you, pressed play today. I am truly here to serve your needs. If there's something you'd like to hear on the podcast, email me, hello@40thrive. This show is not about me. I'm a conduit. I'm meant to connect you to the support and resources you need to live the best freaking life over 40. Got it? All right, let's do this together. Okay, let's get into today's episode. We have a guy on the show. A guy. Can you believe it? It took this long to happen, but Arthur Vibert has had a rich and varied career working in advertising in London, Chicago, New York, San Francisco. He's worked as a commercial director, a video producer, and more recently, writing and coaching. Okay, you're over 40 probably, or close to it, so you may remember some of the campaigns he was responsible for. Remember Max Headroom? Or when the Saturn car first came out? He's also done work for Levi's, BMW, but most recently, Arthur is interested in working with people 40 and older who are dealing with the realities of aging in a culture that doesn't really seem to know what to do with them. His message is simple. You are the author of your own life story. Don't let cultural expectations or the opinions of others push you into a life you don't want to live. I'm about to share the story of how I first discovered Arthur and how I'm old, come at me, was like the very thing that made me reach out to him. Okay, that's enough chatting. Let's get into my conversation with Arthur Vibert. Arthur, welcome to the 40 Thrive Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, you know you're making history today. You are the first dude on the 40 Thrive Podcast.
Well, I'm honored to be the first dude.
I'm sure you weren't expecting to be called a dude today, but here we are.
It happens periodically. I'm good with it.
So as many entrepreneurs and business people and anyone with a job really is on LinkedIn on occasion looking for trends and seeing what's up, I see this post, as you know, when someone comments on a post, even though you're not connected with that person, you could see the content. And I see this comment of Wendy Miller, who everybody on this podcast knows. She was on twice already, but she had commented on a post that you made. And what caught my attention was you're like, I'm 65. Actually, I want to quote it. I'm old, come at me. Which I may or may not have said repeatedly over the last 48 hours once we decided to do this. But I just love the way you are owning your age in such a time where I feel like we're hiding from our age. So can you tell me the evolution of how you got there?
So I've never really been bothered by my age. It's not something that I felt particularly weird about. I was talking to a friend of mine who I met actually on LinkedIn. He is a former ad guy like I am, a couple of grumpy old ad guys. We were laughing about how the great thing about getting past a certain age is that you just don't give a damn anymore. There's things you care about, of course, people you love and that kind of stuff, but there's so much that's just not worth caring about anymore. And we were talking about advertising with that in mind. We thought, wouldn't it be a great resource to offer the world of advertising and the world of marketers? A couple of old grumpy ad guys who had been through the wars, done the whole thing, and we can offer their services to look at things and say, that's awful, that's stupid, what were you thinking? This is going to offend people, whatever else it is. And so we created an agency called Fallow Fields Agency. And we did a website, and nothing, I wasn't really expecting anything to happen with it. It's just fun, let's see what happens, toss it out there. So Cindy Gallup saw it and loved it, and she blew it all over her network, and she knows like a zillion people. And within hours, we were getting thousands of hits on a website, and we were getting all kinds of attention on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, and it just kind of like, good heaven, had no expectation anything like this was going to happen. And the amazing thing is I've got hundreds of direct messages from people saying, I'm an ad person too, I aged out too, and this is wonderful, this is exactly what was on my mind, do you have any work? And we were saying, well, actually, no, because we weren't expecting this to happen.
She just shared the website itself for this new company that you had started, basically owning the fact that you were two grumpy old ad men. And so she loved that. And for my audience who doesn't know who Cindy Gallup is, she's from Make Love Not Porn is her brand, but she's very much an advocate for owning yourself and owning your age and owning everything top to bottom, really. So I'm sure that was a huge boost, as you said. So she shares the website, people start looking at it. But when you first started, did you expect that you would break the boundaries or the restrictions of advertising and get more work? Or what was basically the motivation for it?
We had very small expectations. We really did. We did it for fun to see, if anybody would pay attention. Lots of people paid attention, surprisingly so. We thought we might get some fun jobs out of it. We weren't really looking to score big time advertising agency type jobs or anything like that. But we thought it'd be kind of a fun service to offer. So it just amazed us when we got that kind of response. But what it told me was that there were a lot of people who were older than 40 and 50 and up who had these amazingly successful careers. And the only reason that they had stopped working is because they got too old for advertising, not because they couldn't do it anymore, or because they weren't smart or they weren't creative or any of those things. It's just that advertising kind of eats its young. And, when you turn 40, you're out. But then I realized that it's not just old ad people, it's old everybody. At a certain point, you start to look around and you realize you become invisible. When you look at television commercials or shows on TV or whatever else, there may be a few older people, but they tend to be reserved for the mentor or the aged parent or something like that. They're not just regular people doing things in their lives. We're not represented anymore. And I was like, oh, so when you speak to people who are past a certain age, it's like no one else is talking to them. They're kind of alone out there. And that really came home to me when we created this website. So that led me to create the 2 videos that I've done so far that I put on LinkedIn, because I thought, you know what? I think my life has gone through some ups and downs and all that kind of thing, but I'm 65 now. Life is great, and it can be. A lot of my philosophy is that you can't, and I said this in the first video, you can't wait for people to give you a chance. No one's going to do that. You really have to adopt the attitude that you're going to go out and make things happen for yourself. It's not like it used to be when you're 20 and people give you a chance and we'll take a flyer on you. When you're older, it's like, that people just, it's like you disappear from sight. People just lose interest for some reason. Maybe it's because they're afraid. It's like, as they say, an old person knows exactly what it's like to be young, but a young person has no idea. Not a clue.
Right. Yeah. One of the things you say in your videos, go out and get it and make these opportunities like you're saying here. But what I have noticed, at least with the women that I work with, they don't always know what it is that they want at this age. Let's go back for a second. Where were you in your life when you decided to really lean into this age thing?
That was probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And a number of things happened to me in my life. I was drinking too much. I was spending far too much time binge watching various shows on TV. I was eating too much, and the food I was eating was not great food. And I went through a period where a lot of people that were very near and dear to me started dying. And anybody who reaches a certain age has this experience. You start to feel like everybody's dying. And then you think, am I next? So it's very easy to kind of spiral into this state of depression where you're feeling like, this is just how it goes. This is how it ends. You just kind of slowly sink into the couch and one day you're gone. And I went to a doctor's appointment and he told me, you're almost obese. Your liver's not looking so great. You need to do something. That made me start to think about all these things kind of swirling around in my head, maybe think maybe it's time to do something about this, because I didn't really want to disappear into the couch. So I stopped drinking. And for me, that's relatively easy because I'm sort of an all or nothing person. It's very easy for me to just to stop things. It's hard for me to cut back, but it's easy to stop. So I just stopped. And I stopped eating sweets because I had a real sweet tooth, and improved my diet otherwise, more vegetables and all that kind of stuff. And I started working out a lot, high intensity interval training, and I walk a ton. So, it didn't happen overnight, but over the course of about 6 or 7 months, I lost about 55 pounds. And it wasn't really about the weight as much as it was just about how the whole process affected me emotionally. I went from feeling kind of dull and dead to my brain fog disappeared and I kind of woke up. I wasn't waking up feeling dull. And what I thought was just what happens when you get old turned out to be drinking a bottle of wine every night. And when I stopped doing that, I felt a lot better.
Imagine that.
Yeah, go figure. What's really amazing is that when you go through that process, you kind of rediscover the world and the world rediscovers you. In feeling better, it made me go out more. I felt, well, I can go out and see people and talk to people and that kind of thing. And I felt a lot more comfortable doing that. And I've always thought of myself as an introvert. And, I still need to recharge, as introverts tend to do. My son's an extrovert and he cannot not be around people. So how do you do that? But, we're all different. But I enjoy people. I like being with people and I like talking and going through the whole process and sort of intellectually challenging conversations. I love being creative and coming up with ideas and doing all that. I just love all that stuff. And I was letting that go. And when I kind of recreated myself, I got it all back. And what's nice about it is, you were talking earlier about you're not sure where you want to go or what you want to do. When you do this sort of thing, you open yourself up to all kinds of possibilities. Things that you weren't expecting come to you just because you've opened yourself up to the world. And you get to pick and choose. It's kind of an amazing process. But a lot of what happens is when you start to get depressed, you hide behind a computer or you burrow into your phone or you do what I was doing, which is binge watching a lot of shows and that kind of thing. And you withdraw. And when you withdraw from the world, all that stuff disappears. It's easy to kind of get into that self-fulfilling loop where, you're feeling bad, so you're not looking after yourself, and that makes you feel bad. You keep doing this. It's like the old joke, quitting smoking is easy. I've done it 100 times. It's the same with losing weight. Losing weight, everyone knows how to lose weight. It's not a big surprise. It's not because it's a mystery. Everyone wants there to be this magic pill, but Of course, there's not. And also, losing weight was the solution for me, not the solution for everybody. People are comfortable at all different kinds of weights.
What's important to point out is that maybe it was losing weight for you, but really it was about you not trying to figure out all of the steps and what was next for you, but to really look inward of what would make you feel better, what would make you feel like you're showing up, what would make you feel more alive and in charge and invigorated. And that happened to be some of these physical things for you. So you make such a great point. It's not for everyone, but what is that thing that's holding you back and making you feel like you're just surviving and not thriving? And so for many people, and I see this all the time in my community, just taking those steps forward. That's what you did. You stopped drinking, you ate better, you started even just walking. Take your dogs for a walk or just go for a walk. I love that you are an example of action creates inspiration, creates motivation, but start with just taking a few steps first and the rest of it will appear.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much. I think you've summed it up beautifully. I think that just do something, take action. I was, again, conversation with my son. The secret to success to my mind is taking action because so few people will do it. People plan a lot, people think about it a lot, they kind of get into their heads about it, but just doing it, even if it's a small action, because as you say, one small action leads to another one. And in a relatively short period of time, you're kind of getting to where you want to be. You don't have to have your 5-year plan for how you're going to lose weight and you're going to meet people and this is going to happen and that's going to happen. Just start.
In your video, you talk about doing big things and just really taking action. And I think that it divides people, right? Because 50% or so are like, yes, I'm on board. Let's do it. I'm motivated. And the other 50% actually shrink back because they're like, that's easy for you to say. I have no idea what I want.
Yeah.
And so even if it's like, do something that makes you happy, go out and if you used to play golf, pick up a club and go to the driving range. Don't do 18 holes because that's overwhelming, but go to the driving range and hit a few balls. Do something because I think we get into this place where you're exactly what you said earlier. This is it for me. The script has been written and I'm getting toward the end of the script, or at least way past the middle, that I can't change the story. I love the messages you're putting out there because you call it as you see it. It's total bullshit.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly right. And for me, the big message is you get to rewrite the script. You're the author of your life. You get to decide how it goes. You don't have to listen to what your friends or what society or, whatever self-help book you happen to have selected this day say to you. You may think some of them are good ideas or not, but you get to pick. And I think too many people allow themselves to be just kind of follow along without realizing that you don't have to follow. You can go off to that other less traveled path. And there's so much joy and adventure and wonderful stuff to be found there.
So I have to talk about this because it's sort of the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
As we know, men sometimes get away with things that women don't necessarily. I have 3 kids. My husband goes to work. No one's ever like, how do you balance it all? If you're a mom and you're working, there's just different rules for men and women. Do you believe that the rules are the same as you get older? Or, you've been married a long time, yes?
Almost 30 years, yeah.
Do you see the rules of aging different or the challenges different for yourself versus your wife and other women?
The full disclosure, my wife is 10 years younger than me, so her aging experience is different than mine.
But she's still in her mid-50s.
Yeah. Not being a woman, I can't honestly say that I know if the experience is different. I'm going to guess that it is. Women have a whole separate set of issues that they deal with. I've tried to live my life, my married life. We traded off kid duty. She did the first 5 years and I did the next 10 or so. So I stayed home. I was a stay-at-home dad. I worked, from home and I did a lot of my video production work and that kind of stuff I was able to do out of the house. But, I was the guy who I did the laundry, took people to soccer practice and all that stuff. I feel like I get how that works and I get how the kind of compromises you have to make in order to make all that stuff happen. And so I completely understand that. Getting older, I think the expectation for women is that they're supposed to be eternally young. I don't have that expectation, but I think that society seems to, kind of impose that on women. And I happen to love women who are older. I know people who are obsessed with very young women. They're great, just like young men are great, but I don't even know how to talk to a lot of young people. I talk to my son all the time. We get along great. But what motivates us are 2 completely different worlds. I used to teach advertising for several years. So I interacted with a lot of 20-somethings. And I still have relationships with all of them. It's just a different perspective. You get to a certain age and it's like, it's all this life in between, 20 years ago, I was in my 40s. 20 years ago, they were 5.
That's very different.
It is. And so when it comes to women, I personally appreciate, men and women for that matter, I appreciate the life experience, the knowledge, the wisdom, all that kind of wonderful stuff that makes it possible to have real, meaningful, deep conversations, which, was one of the things I absolutely adore doing. But I recognize that the aging experience is different for women than it is for men.
If you had two women to go out and say, okay, we're going to start this ad agency and talk about being older, I just don't know that it would be as well received as having these two grumpy old men. I just think about like, okay, so you're a man with gray hair and your hair comes in probably, maybe 20 years ago and it starts to go gray and you just kind of let the process go. But if a woman lets the gray come in, they literally get an Instagram account with hundreds of thousands of followers because people are so amazed. She's so brave to let her gray hair come in naturally. And so you're absolutely right in the expectation. And so I find that there are so many women who are trying to hide the aging process or trying to hold on to looking maybe 10 years younger so they don't age out of their jobs. You see a lot of men in VP, senior VP, executive, president roles, and they're in their 50s and 60s. And you don't see as many women in that age group in leadership necessarily. And I just wonder if you notice just in the work that you're doing, some of the challenges that women are facing. I don't know. Do you have insight for us women who are trying to not age out of life?
The only insight I can give you is I think one thing that men do that women don't do as much as I think they should, because they certainly deserve to, is to be very bold in how they go about asking for things and making things happen. I think women can be too nice. Now, in a lot of situations, I think that is really great because it makes for a much better place to work when people are working with you in a way that is instead of someone barking and yelling at you all the time, as men have a tendency to do with that whole alpha thing. Women have a much better way of working to make things happen, in my experience. But having said that, I think women can demand more, and I think they should. It's scary as hell, and I think it's taking a chance. It's a risk for sure. But the thing is that if you are as good as you think you are, and I think the one nice thing about getting to a certain age is you have a pretty clear idea of kind of where you stand and things. You should ask. You should go in and say, I think I'm ready for this. I want this. This is, and I'm not just talking about money. I'm talking about responsibility, the whole spectrum of stuff that you can ask for in a corporate environment,
right?
Or any environment for that matter. I would say just be bold, because you've earned it. You deserve it.
And really, what is there to lose?
Well, exactly.
And to go back to your messaging, your videos, your blog posts, that is a thread I see throughout is what do you have to lose? Why not take a chance? Because you're already where you are. If you go for what it is you want, worst case really is that you're where you are already.
Yeah, I think that's true. And, in corporate environments, people will take advantage. The corporation doesn't want to have to pay you more money.
Right.
Because that's how corporations roll. They don't want to pay anyone more money. But, on the other hand, the squeaky wheel does tend to get the grease. And so often, and I've certainly seen this, I've certainly seen people who, and men in particular, do this. They go in and even though they're completely undeserving, they go in and ask for more. And everyone's like, well, why are they mumbling, grumbling about it? And sometimes they get it. If the idiot who no one really likes that much goes in and demands more and gets it, if you deserve it, why don't you go in and ask for more?
Right. What is that meme that's going around that's like, have the confidence of a mediocre white man or something?
Yeah. And that's true. That's exactly right. This is an interesting thing about advertising. And someone enlightened me to this the other day. I mean, I kind of knew it, but I had an interesting conversation and I was like, okay, yes, I get it. There's this whole thing about ageism in advertising, and it is a problem. In advertising, only 6% of the people working in advertising are over 50, whereas in any other profession, it tends to range between 27, 28%, and 35%. Ageism in advertising is definitely a thing, but the problem is that we're all mostly old white guys. We got to play. We got to get in the sandbox and play. So is ageism an issue? Yeah, it's an issue. But racism is a bigger issue because there's a whole bunch of people that never get into the sandbox.
Yes.
And when you think about it, and this is the irony of it all when it comes to advertising, and I'm sure it's true of other industries as well. But advertising in particular, because the whole goal is to speak to people to get them to buy things, right? And because America is a diverse country, as we know, it's not all middle-aged white guys. It makes sense to have people who understand people who aren't middle-aged white guys, like say women or people of color or LGBTQ people, this whole range of other people are out there. It makes sense for those people to be part of that conversation, to be in there to help communicate. So anyway, it's a complicated thing. My honest viewpoint on advertising is that traditional agencies are going the way of the dinosaur, but that's a whole other conversation.
While you may talk about advertising, really the lessons that you teach are really life lessons. They have nothing to do with just the workplace. I mean, they apply to the workplace, but they apply to your community. They apply to your family. I mean, I've seen that and I've talked about it on the show where somebody raises kids or has a life and accomplishes amazing things and then get to a certain age and it's like their opinion doesn't matter at all. I mean, how many families have you seen where all of a sudden the parents who've done all of these things are completely disregarded in their wants and needs and decision making, by these younger kids, like, oh, you don't know anything. It's like, well, hold on. Yeah. Because they actually know many, many things. And I think that whole respect your elders that we grew up with really applies to not just showing them respect, but valuing what people have to offer. We're very quickly becoming those elders. And if we aren't able to look at others with that respect and see the value in them, that's exactly what we're teaching those younger than we are to do to us when we get there.
I think that's right. I think that's the downside of this whole American rugged individualist society, where we all have to go out on our own and make things happen all by ourselves. It's of course a myth because it's impossible to do anything by yourself. Not impossible, but it's very difficult. We work with people, we have friends, we have networks, everything that goes into making things happen, we do together. But unfortunately, I think there's a thought pattern that goes with that, which is that once you're past a certain age, you're like, okay, I'm on my own now. I'm just going to take care of things my way from here on in. And that family group that we used to be familiar with and was so important kind of falls by the wayside. And what seems to happen is what you're describing just now, which is that kids are like, you go live in the retirement home now and you can have these 5 books and this old couch and you're good. Who wants to live with a bunch of old people? Not me. I love old people, but I don't just want to know old people.
Right.
What is interesting about life is the mix, having young people and middle-aged people and old people and men and women, the whole panoply of human existence. That makes it interesting.
Absolutely. I think having our very first dude on the 40 Thrive podcast, one of the things I want to ask you, okay, I'm going to fully admit right here, sometimes I get very wrapped up in my own aging and my own insecurities around it that I don't necessarily seek out to listen to maybe people like my husband, who happens to be a few years older. He's 52, I'm 48. We're getting older every day. But what would you tell the women who are listening? How can we actually support the men in our lives? What are some of the challenges that maybe are unique to men in getting older? What are ways we can support that?
That's a good question. I think one of the things that happens for a lot of men as they get older is that they tend to have this vision of themselves as being powerful, in control, and all this kind of stuff. And as you get older and younger men come along and they're clearly stronger and more powerful and more in control than you are, it's very easy to start to feel like you're kind of irrelevant. Now, I don't feel that way. I don't let that stuff bother me. I just like, I'm doing what I do and I'm going to continue to do that. And I'm feeling good about that. But I know for a lot of men, including some of my friends, they do feel like, well, it's like the magic juice has gone out of me. I don't have that strength and power anymore. I don't know how you support that though. I think it's maybe just something to be aware of, that's a sensitivity. I think a lot of men can get snappy as a result of that, because if they feel like they're not being respected or their opinion no longer matters or that kind of thing, they'll snap. It's easy to say, why are you being like that? Because it's all internal. It may not be something that anybody else has said. It's just you start to feel like disrespected or whatever else. And I think it's really difficult for a lot of men. So I think it would just be really a question of understanding that, where that's coming from, because I've seen that a lot.
Do you feel like you experienced that before you lost the weight and got fit and stopped drinking and all of that? Do you feel like you were kind of headed in that direction of feeling disregarded?
Yes, there's no question. No question. I definitely was. I think that for me, a lot of the process I went through, getting through that, really helped tremendously with that, because I came to realize that it's that old thing where we worry about what other people are thinking about us. And I think, if we could stop doing that, we would all change our lives dramatically. Because the real honest to goodness truth is that the people who love you are going to love you no matter what you do. The people that hate you are going to hate you no matter what you do. And this is the other thing we do. There's 30 people in a room, 29 of them love you, and one person is hating you. You're like, how do I change that person's mind? What can I do? Totally ignoring 29 people, right?
Yep.
Right? It's like, why do we do that? Forget that one person who hates you. Let them go on their way. Enjoy the people that love you. And then the rest of the people, most of the people, aren't thinking about you at all. So,
Right.
if we can just get out of that thing where we're worried, does that person think I'm too old or too young, or so, who cares? It doesn't matter any more when you're 20 than it does when you're 60. What really matters is how you feel about you, and then the rest will come. And I really feel, in my own experience, I just seen that happen to myself and to other people. That's one of the great things about it. You just stop caring about what other people think about you. And then you realize, there's plenty of people who love you. It's a joy to have them around.
That's what matters. Thriving is such an inside job. The more you really get in touch with your own needs and doing things that make you feel proud of being who you are, the rest of that, it's so much easier to go, I don't care how that person feels. But when I teach women in podcasting specifically, it's because they're getting their voice out there literally, and it can be extremely difficult, especially as many of them are over 40. I will say to them, if somebody hates you and you're living a mediocre life, they're going to hate you when you're living an extraordinary life, but you're going to care less when your life is extraordinary.
Yeah, that's true.
So you might as well do those things that make you happy, because that person is not going to change either way. At this point, you understand that 40 Thrive is 40 is a beginning.
Yeah.
As far as this podcast and everything that I stand for. So a lot of people will say oh, I'm not in my 40s. Clearly, you're not in your 40s. 40 is the beginning of caring less about what other people think, about really understanding that time is limited. However much time we have, we don't know, but we know that there's a finite amount of it.
Yep.
And that it's really time to do the things that we want to do. So when I say 40 Thrive, I mean 40s, 50s, 60s, beyond. However long you're willing to take control of your life. So when I ask you, because I ask all my guests, what does 40 Thrive mean to you? I mean 40 and beyond. So can you tell my audience what 40 Thrive means to you?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that question because I listened.
Of course.
To me, 40 Thrive means it's finally the time when you get to be your best self. All those things that you've thought about, those dreams that you've had, all that kind of stuff. Now is the time when you can realize that stuff. The kids have gotten to the point now where you don't have to hover over them all the time, or they're out of the house, depending on how old you are. For me, when my son went off to college, that was completely freeing. I felt I can do anything now. I can go places, I can do things. I don't have to come home at a certain time. It's awesome. It's like all these things that society puts on us, these restrictions, suddenly fade away. And except for the one restriction, which is to think that you're too old to do things. And if we can just get past that, you're too old to do stuff, and realize that is completely self-imposed BS. You're only too old to do anything you think you're too old to do. If you think you can do something, go do it. If you're physically not able to lift 100-pound things over your head, don't do that thing. But, most of the things that anybody else can do, you can do when you're older, and you should. I was talking to someone last night who's 77 and was telling me about his 5 motorcycles. He still enjoys riding motorcycles. People look at him like he's crazy. He goes, why can't I ride motorcycles when I'm 77?
Right.
Good on him.
I think the rules are just obliterated at that age.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're absolutely right as well, because people ask me if I got healthy because I wanted to live longer. And I said, no, I don't have no idea how long I'm going to live. I just want to live better while I'm here. I want to maximize the time I have on this wonderful planet and be able to enjoy it to its fullest as long as I possibly can. If that's one more day, then it's one more day. If it's another 20 years, it's another 20 years. Either way, I'm just grateful to be able to do this.
I love it. Well, please keep doing what you're doing because people are noticing. I really enjoy your putting it out there and seeing the reaction of all these other people who are like, yes, someone is speaking up for us. So I think the more we as leaders can maybe shed a different light on what aging looks like and what people who are over 40 and beyond have to offer, the better off we all will be. Arthur, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
Jackie, thank you. I really appreciate spending this time with you. It was great.
You can follow Arthur on LinkedIn or Facebook, and you can also find him at his website, arthurvibert.com. Thank you so much for listening. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, so you never have to search for another episode again. And if you feel inspired, I would so appreciate a rate and review on your favorite podcast app. I would love to hear what you think. Until next time, take care and keep thriving. Thank you.